Welcome to the HeartKids podcast. Join us to hear stories of Australians affected by childhood heart conditions. My name is Rachael Knowles and I'm one of your hosts. I'm 24, I'm a journalist, and I live with a congenital heart condition. I was born with tricuspid atresia and had Fontan surgery at the age of 2. I'm passionate about people and their stories, and I'm excited to walk with you on this journey as we share experiences and learn more about those of us living with childhood heart conditions. To begin, we'd like to acknowledge that this podcast is being recorded on Gadigal land in Warrung, otherwise known as Sydney. We acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and the land that you're listening in from today. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, and pass that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander listeners. So my guest today is Kimberley. So Kimberley and her husband lived in Adelaide with their 2 children, and their youngest, Michaela, was born with a congenital heart condition. Michaela had surgery as an infant and is now a happy and healthy 2-year-old. However, Kimberley has had to navigate a recovery of her own when she started noticing she was struggling with her own mental health and well-being after bringing Michaela home from surgery. Today's conversation is mainly going to focus on the importance of parents' mental health and reaching out for support when you need. I would like to welcome Kimberley. Thank you for being here with us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Anytime. I guess we'll kick right in. Tell me a little bit about Michaela and her heart condition.
Sure. So Michaela received her diagnosis when she was 4 weeks old. We'd had a bit of a long stay in hospital prior to her delivery anyway. So we'd been in hospital for about 6 weeks. I was on bed rest. Thomas, our 4-year-old, was premature, so they were a little bit concerned that Michaela might come early. And we were so excited to get to 37 plus 2 and deliver her, which is technically term. And after a long hospital stay, I was so excited because to me that meant no stay in the special care nursery. But at Michaela's, I can't remember if it was her 48-hour or her 72-hour check. So the midwives do checks a couple of days after delivery. Michaela was born by caesarean. The midwife came in and told me that Michaela's oxygen saturation levels were quite low. And that they were taking her into the nursery to monitor her. So we had a 4-week stay in a special care unit, which was distressing in itself. I'd already spent 6 weeks separating my time between being in hospital and trying to give Thomas the attention that he deserves, and then just trying to get to the bottom of why Michaela's oxygen levels were consistently so low. It all happened really, really fast, and thinking about it is a little bit triggering. On the day of Michaela's diagnosis, we had been preparing to take her home on oxygen. The paediatrician had thought that it was just immature lungs that hadn't developed properly. So we were preparing to bring her home on oxygen. And when I arrived at the nursery, Michaela wasn't in the nursery. Now, I trust the nursing staff there. I've spent so much time with them. I know them really well. They're like family. I remember saying to the midwife, where's my daughter? And she said, she's had enough. She's gone for a walk. And I was like, well, I don't blame her. I'm sick of being here too. I went and met one of the other midwives that were bringing Michaela back down. She'd gone up for a scan. And I asked her how it went. And she said, you really need to speak to your paediatrician, which was a bit of a red flag because we had such a good rapport with the nurses there already. They were generally pretty open in telling us what their thoughts were or, what was going on. So to be kind of shut down really quickly was a bit of a warning sign for us. They then brought Michaela back down to the nursery. So I sat with her like I did most days over those 4 weeks. Spent an awful lot of time sitting next to her crib. And the paediatrician called to see whether Marcus was coming down at all. Fortunately for us, Marcus was in the car park at the time with Thomas asleep in the car. So he came straight in, and the paediatrician at the time was then called to deliver another baby at another hospital, so we had to wait. And then when he came back, he told us that Michaela had been diagnosed with a heart condition and that it was TAPVD, which confuses me and sometimes I get the words around the wrong way, but it's total anomalous pulmonary venous drainage, and it's basically where the plumbing of the heart is just plugged into the wrong chambers. So the paediatrician told us that we would be medevaced over, or so we'd be taken by ambulance to the Women's and Children's Hospital here in Adelaide, which is the specialist Women's and Children's Hospital, and that at some point we would meet with the cardiology team there, and then we would need to fly to Melbourne for Michaela to have open heart surgery. It all happened super, super quickly. Waiting for the paediatrician to tell us what was going on took forever. It's sort of that sinking feeling in your gut where you know something's not right, but you don't know what it is. So waiting for that. And then from the time he told us what was wrong until we arrived at the Women's and Children's Hospital was only a matter of hours, and I wasn't prepared for that. So he'd sort of told us that we could expect to be moved within 24 hours. I think it was about 2 hours later. It might have been 3. I mean, realistically, it could have been even longer, but it just happened so quick. So Michaela was popped into a crib and wheeled out of the hospital, and we were taken and thrown into utter chaos at a different hospital, which probably, when I think about it, and the more I think about it, is probably one of the reasons that I've struggled with my mental health following her diagnosis, because it was traumatic. It did happen really quickly. We were taken out of, to be in a hospital is uncomfortable anyway, but then to be taken to a different hospital where you're with different nurses, you're with different treating professionals, and to not really know exactly what's going to happen is really, really scary. So we were only in the Women's and Children's for a couple of days, fortunately. By then I was done. I wanted out of hospital. I wanted to take my baby home. And the cardiology team were amazing. So they arranged for Michaela to come off of oxygen because she was still on oxygen at the time. And they prepared us for discharge and sent us home. So we were home for about 4 weeks. And in that time we had to wait. We still had regular reviews at the hospital and with the cardiologist. But we just had to wait for a day in Melbourne to travel over for Michaela to have her surgery.
At any point as well, if you want to take a moment, that's completely fine as well. I appreciate you sharing all of that. I really do. I guess.
Thank you.
I imagine the diagnosis was really hard to kind of process after waiting for so long as well. I guess for you as a mum with, you had your other bub as well, what was it like to, I suppose, how did you prepare and what supports were around you at the time to kind of send Michaela into in the next stage of, open heart surgery and looking at what kind of came next for her?
So for us, it was quite terrifying. I think with anyone that's had a diagnosis, a CHD diagnosis, and knowing that you need open heart surgery, it's quite terrifying. The statistics are quite scary. Marcus and I like a lot of information. So we did a lot of research into Michaela's condition and what the expected prognosis was. So I guess we were armed with a lot of information that kind of alleviated a little bit of stress for us. We're really, really lucky that we have an amazing support network. And I think it's because of our support network that we were able to get through it as relatively easily as what we did. Now that I look back on it, it wasn't easy. It was absolute utter hell, if I'm completely honest. But at the time, it was sort of just taking each day as it came and just same old, just going on with whatever normal routine we could kind of establish for ourselves. So locally, we had friends that dropped in and cooked for us, which was really nice. And it only sounds like something little, but it was amazing. For one day, we didn't have to think about cooking. They literally rocked up, told us they were taking over my kitchen. And I don't share my kitchen with anyone. So that was a big step. But they came in, cooked dinner for us, cleaned up and then left. We arranged for Marcus's mum and dad. So they're in Queensland. They flew down and met us in Melbourne and stayed with us for the duration, which meant that Thomas had company and someone to look after him as well. I can't imagine what it would have been like if we had to drag him to all of our appointments. His resilience is amazing. His empathy for a 4-year-old is phenomenal. But dragging a sibling to hospital is just tough and not really what you want to be doing with someone who should be drawing and, playing in the playground. So we were really lucky to have Marcus's mum and dad with us. And it was a good relationship building, experience for Thomas as well. He's quite close to them, even though we don't see them all that often. So for him, it was just another big adventure. For us, it was stressful, but for him, an adventure. So that's how we tried to keep it. We had a call 2 weeks before surgery to tell us when we needed to be in Melbourne for pre-admission. And we made the choice to drive over rather than flying for 2 reasons. Firstly, we wanted, I guess, a bit of flexibility to be able to do our own thing if the opportunity was available. And we also wanted to avoid seeing people that had the potential to spread anything that might be contagious in Melbourne, that we could catch up with family who were amazing. So we had Marcus's cousin and his wife prepared meals and dropped them off to us. They dropped off snacks. We went to his auntie's house for breakfast and lunch one day, which was amazing. So we were really lucky that we've got a strong family and friend support network around us.
Tell me a little bit about the day of the surgery and kind of preparing yourself as a mum to watch your little girl kind of head into open heart surgery.
So on the day of surgery, we'd actually had a false start the day before. So they'd told us that we were having surgery on the 14th of October. So we'd fast. Michaela had to fast from the day before. So I was breastfeeding her, which meant I couldn't feed her. And physiologically, that is really, really, really difficult. And psychologically, that really messes with you. It's really, really hard to have to separate yourself from a baby that wants to be comforted and fed when you can't do it. So I had to rely on Marcus a lot for that. We got to the hospital on the 14th and they told us that they couldn't fit us in, so had to go home, which fortunately at the time was just across the road from the hospital. So it wasn't a major inconvenience psychologically and emotionally. It was really quite stressful. On the day of the surgery, we arrived at the hospital. So the same process, I'd had to stop feeding Michaela quite early in the morning. We arrived at the hospital and they told us that they didn't have a bed available. And the way it works over at the RCH is that heart surgery, or my understanding is that heart surgery doesn't go ahead unless they have a bed in the ICU or the in the PICU. If they don't have a bed available, they can't put the baby there anywhere after surgery. So Michaela's surgery, like many other kids' surgeries, is dependent on the availability of beds. So we'd been delayed for that. On the day, they told us that they weren't sure that they were going to get us in. They told us to go for a walk, to go and get a coffee. I can tell you what I wanted to do with that coffee. It wasn't fun. It was a long wait. We waited for about 4 hours and then they called us and said, we need you to come straight in. And that itself was really quite traumatic as well. So we'd been told that we'd be able to go through into theatre with Michaela and wait while she was anaesthetised, and that we could stay with her up until that point. Unfortunately, because it happened so quickly, we had to get her in, strip her down, clean her up. So she had to be wiped with special antibacterial wipes or sterile wipes. And then the anaesthetist took her from us. So I don't think I'm going to cry. I don't think I will ever get over the feeling of having to pass my baby to a stranger and leave her screaming and walk out. It was terrifying, and I know it was tough for me. I know for Marcus, he's amazing. He's a cool cucumber. He holds himself together way, way better than I do. But I know even for him, it was really, really tough because you just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, statistics say that she'll be okay and she should have a good recovery and a healthy life, but you just don't know. And when you take into account what the surgeons are dealing with, it's microsurgery. Like how they do it is phenomenal. Yeah, so it was really quite stressful. So we left Michaela in theatre or with the anaesthetist, and then we went and had breakfast, which was not what I'd encourage, but I had an espresso martini. And it was exactly what I needed at the time. So we had a pub lunch or pub breakfast. Yeah, it was good. Went back to the hospital because I had to pump, and I didn't want to go back to the hotel or the apartment because I didn't want to see Thomas. It wasn't that I didn't want to see him, but I didn't want him drawn into the stress and the emotions that we were dealing with. So we had a really lovely day in Melbourne, which sounds horrible, but we were told to keep busy. So we did. So we went for breakfast, we went for lunch, we had dessert at an amazing cafe. And then we caught the tram back into the city, and it was on that tram that they called to say that Michaela's surgery was done, and that we could come back to the hospital. So we headed back to the hospital.
I think it's actually quite lovely to hear that you've had a nice day in that situation. I can remember my mum and dad telling me stories and never telling me what they did on the day, just the panic and the stress. So it's actually really lovely to hear a parent who had a nice day in a really hard circumstance.
It was nice. And Melbourne turned on the weather. It wasn't miserable. It was sunny. Like it was a really nice day. So yeah, we definitely had luck on our side that day. We also had a bit of a funny situation. Marcus had been getting these insurance scam calls, and on the day that the surgeon called to say that Michaela's surgery had gone well, Marcus thought that he was one of the insurance scammers. And so Marcus answered the phone and started playing along. And then he lost the colour from his face, which I have never seen him do before. And he was like, no, it's Marcus. Yes, no, it's Michaela's dad. And then he went bright red. And I have never, in the 12 years I've been with Marcus, seen him blush. So he had thought the surgeon was an insurance scammer. And I will never let him live that down because it is really, really funny.
It's in a podcast now. He's never going to live it down. This is going to live forever.
It's all right. Every year the reminder comes up on Facebook and I share it.
Oh, gosh. Okie dokie. Look, I guess in terms of support as well, tell me a little bit about the role of HeartKids and kind of that, because I know that, recoveries are really hard. So tell me a little bit about, I suppose, Michaela's recovery, and then also linking in with networks like HeartKids that kind of aided those next couple of steps forward for you guys.
So our involvement with HeartKids started at the hospital. So they provided us, through the cardiology nurses, we received a Patch the Brave Heartline teddy bear and Patch the Brave Heartline book, which was phenomenal and became one of our favourites. We used that to read to Thomas almost every night, sometimes multiple times a night in the lead up to Michaela's surgery and even after the surgery. I guess for us, we wanted to normalise it for him as it was something that happens to lots of people. And we wanted to reduce the fear for him, I guess, of what might happen to his little sister. So that, I think, from a parent perspective, that helped us a little bit as well. And from a recovery perspective, I think I briefly spoke with the HeartKids team when we were in Melbourne. They do a morning tea for people. We didn't get to it while we were there. I think because we had Marcus's family there, we had the support we needed at the time, and not everybody has access to that. So we are really, really blessed, and we know that. Then when we got back to Adelaide, we've obviously had checks with the cardiology team, and we've been really fortunate. Michaela's recovery has been straightforward. She had a minor infection at her incision site, which was cleaned up with some swab thingos that one of the nurses gave us. But for us, she's been really lucky, and we've been really lucky that we just have our reviews to make sure that it's all going okay, and it hasn't, we haven't had to worry anymore about, complications or things like that. It's all been really positive. We haven't probably engaged with HeartKids as much as I'd like to, and I think there's probably a few reasons for that. I think engaging with organisations sometimes can make it seem like you're struggling, and for me, that's a really, really, really tough thing to do. I don't like asking for help, and it's probably why I think it's really important to talk about it and to normalise that it's okay to struggle after things like this. They're traumatising, they're stressful, they're life-changing, they have a severe impact and a significant impact on your family and on yourself as a person. So, yeah, my message, I guess, from that is just to reach out for help if you need it. So we're looking forward to getting Michaela's heartbeats. I guess that's something. I know not all states have them, but we have them here in SA. So I guess it's something symbolic. It's probably more for me than for her at this point in time. She's 2. She likes pretty things. She'll wear them if she can, if I let her. But, I guess it's more just a symbol of what she's been through in her short 2 years, or even, just in that short period of time in the lead up to surgery. And I'm really hoping to start engaging with HeartKids and supporting their fundraisers, because I think the work that they do in supporting families that are receiving diagnosis and living with heart conditions is really, really valuable and really, really important.
Michaela's had so much happen in only 2 years of life, and so much of all of her journey has also kind of been your journey as well as a mum. Coming home after such a stressful time, how did you settle back into everyday life?
So returning home, even just being discharged from the hospital initially, is a bit of a life changer. I think as a mum, you have these ideas in your head. It's like when you're getting married, you have these ideas in your head that you've had from, being a small child, of how you think things are going to roll out. And when you're diagnosed, or when your baby's diagnosed with CHD, I mess that up every time. I don't know why.
Me too.
When your baby's diagnosed with a heart condition, it changes the idea that you had in your head, and the life that you thought you were going to live is different. So I guess from that side of things, it was a struggle. I've used the analogy in the past that I kind of feel like a bit of a skill tester, sort of picked me up and dropped me into different hospitals and then dropped me home. And for us, I know it sounds horrible, but for us, it's sort of like our life was put on hold. We still had to go through, getting up, having a shower, eating, feeding the pets, the same minuscule and mundane tasks. But for us, life was sort of put on hold while we waited for the diagnosis, while we waited for surgery, and then while we waited to know that the recovery was going to be okay. While for our friends and our family, the world kept turning and it was business as usual for them. So from that side of things, I think it is a struggle coming back to normal life. I mean, obviously we felt incredibly blessed that we had the support in Melbourne. The family support in Adelaide is a little bit different. I have a beautiful network of aunts and my uncle that provide amazing support, and they checked in with us frequently. My aunt dropped up meals quite regularly. She also brought up chocolate cake. If ever you want to make me feel better, chocolate cake will always work. As the donuts, we had them sent to us while we were in Melbourne by one of our friends. But the recovery, once we got back to Adelaide, was a little bit different. Marcus went back to work and I was juggling Michaela and Thomas. So in itself, going from one child to two children is a big juggle. And then when you throw in a congenital heart issue and recovery and the trauma from that, it did get quite stressful. And it was only a couple of months down the track that I realised how much it had impacted me. I think probably for a little bit I was in denial about how much it had affected me. At the time, we got home from Melbourne and we had to move house. So moving house is really fun at the best of times. Moving house when you have a toddler and a baby that's just had open heart surgery is not fun. And if I hadn't have been for our friends that literally packed up my house or our house, I don't know how we would have done it. So, yeah, it was ridiculously stressful.
I think in any kind of CHD journey, there's a lot of grief and there's a lot of trauma. And I think we focus a lot on all the positives and the things we're really happy for, that sometimes it's really hard to acknowledge that things are difficult and there's a lot of trauma in that. So thank you so much for sharing that. I guess, yeah, coming home and settling and moving house so much, what was, I suppose, how did you look after yourself? What were the things that you did to support your own mental health and your well-being?
I probably didn't look after myself as well as what I should have in the first phase of recovery. So I went back to work fairly early financially. We couldn't afford for me to be off any longer. And it wasn't until I was back at work that I realised the impact that her diagnosis and surgery had had on me. There'd been little things in the past that probably should have been flags. I didn't like looking at photos of her in hospital or from surgery. Even now, I find some days I really struggle with it. Some days I'm fine. I can look at them and it's just part of our past. It's part of our story and that's what it is. Other days it whisks me back and the sounds and the sensations are all there. So that was one. I found that I tried to avoid medical settings. I've never liked hospitals anyway. So having to deal with hospitals as frequently as what we were was completely taking me out of my comfort zone anyway, but I just tried to avoid them as much as possible. I guess the first warning sign that I remember was, or the first warning sign for me that I was struggling was Marcus and I were driving somewhere one evening with the kids in the back of the car, and it was on dusk, which was around the time we were medevaced from the hospital we delivered Michaela at to the Women's and Children's, and an ambulance went past at the traffic lights with a light on inside, so there was somebody in the ambulance. And they were going to the Modbury Hospital because we were around that area, so I know that there's a hospital and I assume that's where they were going. But that was a trigger for me, which set off my emotions. So I started crying. I couldn't stop. I felt sick. My heart was racing. Marcus, I remember, Marcus has always been an amazing support. So, he's always been conscious of how I'm feeling and let me, express my emotions without making me feel guilty or making me feel like I'm a horrible person for being overwhelmed. It wasn't until I went back to work, though, that I realised I was reading a report, and I was writing a report for a colleague, for a client that I'd never even met, and it mentioned a heart condition, and it triggered the emotions, the feeling sick, the horrible pit in my tummy, the tears that didn't stop, a fast heart. I probably was even sweating. It just made me feel awful, and I realised that for me they were possibly symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. So I called Marcus and told him what had happened, told him what I thought was going on, booked into the doctor, asked for a referral to a psychologist, and got myself in to get professional support because that's what I needed. And it was only once that I did that I realised how important it was that I started looking after myself as well. So now, or from then, I went back to dancing. So I was doing burlesque dancing before I had Michaela. So I went back to that, which was really good. The girls that I dance with are so good for my soul. The dancing in itself is good for me. It gets those endorphins going and, it's a good workout. But it gave me the social contact, some extra social contact that I needed. Going back to work was also good. I mean, it was stressful leaving Michaela, but for me, I've always enjoyed my job. I work in a role that helps other people, and that makes me feel good about myself. So, yeah, they're probably the two things that I've started doing again, and I started doing once I realised what was going on, that have been really, really beneficial, and I've continued doing them.
I think it's absolutely colossal that you booked yourself into a psych and you're like, you know what, I'm actually going to do things that make me feel good. I hope that, are you proud of yourself for taking that step?
For me, admitting that I need help is a big step. So in a way, yes. I think I'm also lucky in that because I've had exposure to people that have mental health conditions that I was a little bit aware of what my symptoms could be anyway. I'm disappointed that it took me so long to recognise what it was. When I think back on it, there were times where I was probably snappier at Marcus. I was shorter with Thomas than I would have liked to have been. There's probably 100 examples that were probably flags that I didn't recognise. But it was the two with the ambulance and with the report at work that I realised that there was something really not right. And the only way to get better from something like that is to get professional help. So I'm really lucky too, in a way. I guess there's I've got an online social network of friends that have had babies around the same time in our area, and a couple of them were seeing the same psychologist that I'm now seeing. So they recommended this particular lady who is a perinatal psychologist. So she's a trained midwife as well. So she's got an amazing background and understanding of everything that we've been through, which I think put her in a really good position to build a rapport with me and to help me start building strategies to deal with how I was feeling. I'm a lot better than what I was. I still have days or not days, it doesn't happen all that often, but sometimes there are just little things that trigger things. There was an example at work a couple of months ago. So I work in a medical setting and they called for a crash cart and that was enough to flip my switch. So I recognised what it was. I have an amazing supervisor who had a chat with me for a couple of minutes and then sent me off to get a coffee and I was okay after that. But, mental health isn't something to be laughed at and it definitely shouldn't be ignored because it can just be so bad for you and so unhealthy. Not just for you, but for your relationships as well, to not get help when it's needed. So, yeah, look, I'm glad that I did it. I think I probably wouldn't be talking about our journey today if I hadn't have got the help that I needed.
I think, 2 years later that you're still, looking after yourself is incredible. And look, on a podcast is amazing. I guess in terms of what life looks like now, how is life for you and Michaela and Thomas and Marcus?
It's chaotic. We have both Thomas and Michaela they're both beautiful, beautiful kids. They both have huge hearts, no pun intended. Thomas's ability to empathise and to feel things as a 4-year-old is phenomenal. Michaela has the same empathy. So something upset me the other day and she was like, oh, mummy, and rubbed my arm. So, even at 2, she can pick up emotions, which I think is pretty phenomenal. But they're both very energetic. They are both very stubborn and very strong-willed. So they like to keep me on my toes. But life is busy with kids. So both Marcus and I work. The kids go to family daycare. We have a beautiful family daycare provider with a beautiful group of kids that our 2 spend time with during the day. Thomas has started kindy. He's getting ready for school. And life, I guess, has gone back to what our normal is. As much as possible. I still dance. I catch up with my friends. We have friends that we catch up with most weeks for dinner once a week, which is really good. And yeah, I guess we're really lucky. We've got a beautiful family. We've got beautiful friends, and that's what keeps us going. And that's what held us afloat when we were struggling to keep ourselves afloat.
I think coming back to, I guess, looking at the beginning of this journey to now, I suppose, for what's been the biggest learning curve of this whole experience?
Oh,
big one.
Biggest learning curve. That's a tough one. I think being open to asking for help has been a really big one for me. Admitting that we needed help when we were moving house. I recall sitting in the rocking chair in our front lounge room, and we've moved a lot over the last few years. We've completely lucked out with the rental market. But I remember just after Michaela's surgery, I was sitting in the rocking chair. I think I was feeding Michaela, so I would have been nursing her, and friends and family were walking in to pack up my kitchen. And as I said before, I don't let people into my kitchen. Kitchen's my domain. I don't want people in there touching my stuff and moving my things, potentially a little bit controlling in the kitchen. But, having people come in and just accepting that, I can't do this on my own was a pretty big step. And I think that being aware of the importance of self-care has been huge for me as well. I've always advocated for it for other people. Someone's having a tough day, go and get a cup of tea, go and do something that makes you feel good. But taking that advice yourself is a completely different different situation. Whereas now I know that if I'm dancing with the girls, if I'm taking time out to, grab coffee with a friend or to grab drinks with a friend or, just doing something that makes me feel good, then it makes me puts me in a better position to deal with everyday stresses and to deal with just things that I guess stress you out, and just to deal with the daily challenges of parenting and juggling stubborn to and from
life. That's it. That's it. Oh, look, thank you.
Life in general.
Life in general. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you've shared and for coming on. And I acknowledge that this has been a huge journey, and I think that this is beautiful to be able to share this space with you. So thank you for being here, and thank you for telling us everything.
Thank you for having me. I think it's really important that we talk about our struggles and that we normalise what people go through. And if by sharing our story it helps someone else with their journey, then I think it's worth it.
Thank you, Kimberley. This podcast deals with some heavy things. If this brings up anything for you or somebody that you love, it's important to reach out for help. The HeartKids helpline provides support, advice and guidance for people impacted by childhood heart disease. You can call the helpline on 1800 432 785. To access more information about childhood heart disease as well as support from HeartKids, visit the website heartkids.org.au. The information on this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice from your doctor or healthcare team. Always talk to your doctor about matters that affect your health or your family's health.